Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host,
Brett
Gilliland.
Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland. Today I've got Jeff Meade with me. Jeff, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. We were just talking, man. We had that Duke UConn game. That was a few weeks ago by the time people are listening to this, but man alive, that was crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a great game, really good game. I have no idea how UConn won, but they pulled it off.
They did. Well, again, you are Jeff Meade. You are the Founding Director, Entrepreneurship Educator, Education Innovator, and Venture-Based Learning Advocate. I love this. When your team reached out and I started looking into your situation and what you're doing here with Paul Quinn College, it's amazing. And so, the introduction I've got here is imagine a college where every student graduates, not just with a degree, but with a business they've built and run. You're making that vision a reality at Paul Quinn College, man. So I think that is awesome. So let's talk more about it. But before we dive into that, what has helped you become the man you are today?
Ooh, good question. I love it. Good question. I'd say family. Family first and foremost. I have two amazing parents who sacrificed a ton just to help me pursue my dreams. They sacrificed a bunch. Both my parents are immigrants from the Caribbean. And, I often like to think that what's amazing to me is that my grandfather was a farmer in the Caribbean. Parents came over, just wanted a better life for themselves, and they sacrificed everything so my sister and I can have a better life. So definitely family. That's like my through line. Family. Yeah. Then my current family, my wife, I would say she's like my biggest cheerleader. Also my biggest critic. She knows when to do both. And then lastly, I'd probably say my brothers, and when I say brothers, I have this group of friends who I've known for like 30 years, 3 decades, and they've been like brothers to me. We've gone to each other's weddings. We constantly push each other just to chase greatness. And so I'd say, definitely family, wife, and brothers. That's what's made me the man I am today.
Love it. What, talk about your journey through your career. I mean, so obviously you're here now. You don't just wake up and leave this program out of college. And so talk a little bit about that, the rise of that for you.
Yeah. So I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, right? And there's been parts of my life where being an entrepreneur wasn't a title that you embrace, right? You're a business owner, but now entrepreneur seems to be in vogue. Yeah. But I started out, funny enough, out of college, and I started this as we said it was a management consulting firm. That's what we said. My partner and I, we were both like 21, 22 years old. And we went out into the world and said, we are management consultants. And surely, when we got out there, people were like, no, we don't believe it, right? What are you guys going to consult on? And so, for us, it was really, we were consulting around the culture. And what's funny to say this now is when we came out, we were helping companies get better at consulting or developing products for hip hop culture. And this is how I date myself. That was a hard sell. It was a hard sell to say that you should attach yourself to hip hop culture. And so what was funny is I actually went back to a professor of mine and I said, it's just not working. Like I see the market, I see that there's an opportunity because I see all these products that are being pitched at us. The marketing is awful. So I see this opportunity, but for some reason we can't grab it. And what was great about what my professor said was he said, you guys are positioning yourself wrong. No one's going to believe a 21-year-old is a consultant, right? Like you just don't have enough experience. And he said, why don't you reframe your business as a market research company? So you go in there with insights. And that was the big unlock for us. It was amazing. Once we said that we were now a market research company, we would go do focus groups, we'd do interviews, one-on-one interviews. That was like the big unlock. Then all of a sudden people are like, oh, okay, we believe it now. And so it just kind of took off from there. And so worked with a lot of firms, grew that business really well, had 2 offers to buy it. We fumbled both of those offers because we didn't know what we were doing.
Mhm.
But it was a heck of a ride, and from that I actually ended up going back to business school. Then from business school came out and just started working. I started working at another agency, and we grew that agency. It was three of us, so it's pretty funny to get your MBA and then start at a company so small, right?
Yeah, right.
We went from three people and grew it to about 35 folks, and then grew the shop to about 20 million in sales. So
Nice.
it was phenomenal growth, and that was in about 3 years. So it was
Amazing.
fantastic. But yeah, so we did that, and then I I left there to start my shop again. I kind of had this entrepreneurial bug and went back into research, and I had a client that was on the East Coast, and they said, "Hey, we have this venture capital money we just got, and we'd love you to run our marketing." And they felt comfortable saying that because behind the scenes I was saying I'm getting kind of burnt out. I want to try something different, and so I did that. Took the leap, moved to Philly, moved the family to Philly, and we started working in the sneaker industry.
Oh, wow.
And it was fantastic. We were at like a boutique Foot Locker type place.
Okay.
I always say that Foot Locker has about 3,000 locations. We had 50 when I got there. 2 years later, we had over 100. So massive growth. And it took them 25 years to get to 50, then 2 years to get to 100. So
Wow.
yeah, big culture shift. But that was a great experience. Then we moved down here to Dallas after that, and I started helping some companies grow their business, some agencies that looked like mine back in the days. And I had one agency say to me, "Man, you should come in house with us." And I was like, you know what? I think I want to start my own thing, consulting again, and was doing that and really loved it. And truly, what changed for me was there was no diversity in my client base. And so I just wanted to figure out, I was like, why are there no Black agency owners? I just didn't see any. So I went on this journey trying to figure out, why does this not exist? And so I was like, well, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna help more minority owners start their agencies. And from there, it just got bigger. As I started talking to more people, I said, I was looking at this problem in a very myopic way. I said, now I just want more Black entrepreneurs. And so that's when I started having conversations. Somebody connected me with the president of Paul Quinn, and he said, "Man, I've been trying to get this entrepreneurship program off the ground." And I said, "Wow, this is what I've been thinking." And we joined together about a year and a half ago to launch this program and to be
Yeah.
really bold with it. And so, like you said in the intro, it's not just like students are taking classes. Every student who comes to Paul Quinn has to start and operate a business as a graduation requirement. Right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's really bold, and it's just getting underway, but it has been a phenomenal experience so far.
That's cool. So if I'm a student there, then what you're saying is I'm going to be going to do my normal classes, but then I'm also going to start and run a business and have a place like that you run, an organization inside the college that helps me ideas and branding and marketing and whatever, right? That's what it's doing. And then
Right.
hopefully they go out and they graduate, and then that literally helps make a dent in the world, right?
Yeah, that's the plan. And I know statistically, I know most of those students won't be entrepreneurs, when they leave the school. But I do know if I can get students to think and act like entrepreneurs, that's what the marketplace has been saying they want for job candidates. They want somebody who doesn't know what tomorrow is going to look like, but can just jump in, roll up their sleeves, and figure it out. And
Right.
and that's, to me, as an entrepreneur. And so that's what we're building. The starting a business is just the tools we use. We give them the frameworks, the mindset, and then from there, then I can put them in any situation and they'll be successful.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I mean, I look at entrepreneurship. I look at my journey. I mean, when I was a little kid, I was selling candy out of my pockets at school, making cash. I was mowing yards and just going around the neighborhood and saying, "I'll mow your yard," and kind of, I didn't have a quote unquote business, but that's
Right.
entrepreneurship, right? You got to learn. I think people today have to learn how to make money. right? And through entrepreneurship, you can do that. And it doesn't have to be your main gig. It could be a side hustle, and you have your normal job, right? It could be a teacher that has a side hustle at night and in the summers or during the bad weather, whatever it may be. I just think you got to learn how to make money, and I think that's probably what you're doing is educating these kids. Talk to me about, like, when you look at your career now, some of the things maybe you used to say yes to, but now you say no to them. What would that be?
Well, I think the big thing is I used to say yes to everything. And what I mean is I just didn't want to miss out on any opportunities, right? So if anything came down, I would just stretch myself and say, I'll figure it out, right? Like, I'm just going to figure out how to make this happen. But, I think the things that I definitely say no to is I'm a lot more intentional now. And so even what I mean is the beautiful thing about starting this program at a school is folks come out of the woodworks and they see the vision and they want to help. And they're like, hey, I have this, maybe we can plug it into what you're doing. And more times than not, it works in some way or another. But lots of times I say, it's a good idea, but it's not what we're building at Paul Quinn, right? And so it really is just making sure that we know we have a strategy and we know what we need to do to get there. And anything that deviates from that, right, then I'm just like, this is a distraction and it doesn't make sense for us right now. Yeah. So my biggest thing is I try not to get distracted anymore. Before, I felt like I had all the bandwidth in the world, but you get older, you have family, you have work. It just like you kind of got to stay focused.
Yep. You ever read the book Juggling Elephants, or ever heard of that book?
I haven't, no.
It's a good one. And it made me, when you were talking about that, it made me think of the book and, imagine trying to juggle elephants, right? I mean, that's impossible. And so I think it's what we try to do though, as just normal human beings in everyday life, is we try to juggle so much stuff. And that book has a lot of, gave me a lot of clarity on what to focus on, right? And what we focus on expands. And so just, not trying to be the guy that juggles the elephants and be focused and purposeful and be where your feet are at, right? So if you're at home, be the husband, be the dad, right? If you're at work, be the leader, and those things. So what are your daily habits that you have found for yourself and the successful people you've been around throughout your career? What are those daily habits or the no miss items that you've seen?
My big one is I am fanatical about my workouts. So I start every day with some sort of workout, whether I'm in the gym lifting or going for a run or yoga. Like I have to move my body and just be by myself first. So if I'm in the gym, headphones on, blocking out the world, and just that's my time. I always have to have time to myself. Yeah. So that's a big one. And I feel like when I miss that, I feel like I'm on my heels and I'm on defense. I'm like, I never got my me time to start the day, right? So I definitely say that one. And then the other one I would say is really just like, I teach like the stakes are real, right? And so what I mean by that is, there was far too many times I remember when I was in school that we would do stuff and you're like, am I ever going to use this in the workplace, right? Does this make sense in the real world? And then, but for me, it's everything that we're doing in class is applicable to what you will deal with in the outside world. So much so that, in addition to entrepreneurship, I also teach a personal finance class. And so in that class, as we talk about like stocks and credit cards and credit scores and stuff, I bring people who do that stuff every day. Like I brought in someone who does day trading, and I told the students, I don't really want you day trading, but I want you to see what people who do this for a living do, right? And so then they can see the stuff that we're learning in class, how it's applicable to the real world. So definitely, just making sure that I teach like the stakes are real.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you kind of you hinted to was I just want to be present in the moments I'm in and really be available for like these what if moments. And what I mean is, especially when I'm in school, there's definitely a regimented part of my day. I get to school and more times than not, I'm teaching a class. But then after that is really being present for students to come in and say, hey, Professor Meade, what if we did this? Or I had this idea. What if this? And so those moments are priceless, but they're never planned, right? No one ever goes into my calendar and says, hey, Professor Meade, I want to meet with you at this time. Usually what happens is they'll come around the corner and see me in the office and they'll say, oh, Professor Meade, I've been waiting to see you. I had this idea. And so just being available for those what if moments. And that's all about just being present so students can see you. That's a big thing. And then probably lastly, I'll say just keep the main thing, right? And for me, the main thing right now is every Quinnite is an entrepreneur. And so really just doing everything that feeds that. It's a graduation requirement, right? So students are going to have to take certain classes to get that graduation requirement. And so making sure that every single day I'm working on making that dream a reality. So that's probably what I would say. Yeah.
It's good. That's solid, man. How do you dream? Well, that's kind of a big open question, but how do you dream?
That is a good one. I dream. So here's the best part about being at a school, and I think why I really connected with the president, Paul Quinn, and I dream these really big dreams, right? And when I was younger, funny enough, my mother used to have this saying. I used to say, oh, I can't do this or I can't do that. And she would always say, there's no such word as can't. Yeah. And it used to annoy me.
Yep. Mom's right.
Yeah. But it got to me. It stuck. And then I started doing this thing. Well, all right, well, maybe I'll kind of rephrase that and say kind of why not me, right? Why not me became this mantra. And I've taken that through my whole life, this kind of why not me. And it's allowed me to dream really big. And so I will share my big dream right now. My big dream right now is to make us, Paul Quinn, the first institution that will be completely funded by the businesses that our students have started and the businesses that we own, right? So really reimagining a different business model. Coming into academia, and anyone knows this had I given it two thoughts, but it really surprised me that we have one revenue stream, right? And that's tuition dollars.
That's right.
That's it. Something goes wrong, that it just goes south. And so as I started playing with this model some more, what I thought was really interesting was not only do we want to just help students think and act like entrepreneurs, but what if we were actually funded by those businesses? But to take that one step further and make it true, it was not only are we going to help students think and act like entrepreneurs, we need to think and act like entrepreneurs. And so what I'm doing with our department, I call it our venture studio, is now I've done a bunch of fundraising. We're actually going out now to acquire businesses. These businesses that we acquire, we will have operators that run it. But a part of it is that we will have our students working in some of those businesses, kind of like an apprenticeship model. So the big dream is for the school to be completely funded by the businesses we own and the businesses that students start. That is my big dream right now.
I'm gonna clap for that one. That's amazing. Yeah. So just to play that back, so you go out, you start you buy a manufacturing company, whatever it may be, right? You're selling widgets. And the company or the school owns that company, ABC company, let's call it.
Right.
And that company makes $1 million, $20 million, $100 million a year. Obviously, you got to pay somebody to run it and marketing and all the stuff, right? To run it like a normal business. But the proceeds, the profit of that company comes back to the university to help the next student of tomorrow.
Exactly. You got it. That's it.
That's amazing. I've never thought of it that way because you're right, man. It's like, I've got one in college. I've got one getting ready to go to college next year, and then two more after that. And it's like all the universities, what do? They charge us money. And then guess what? It's going to be a little bit more expensive next year and a little bit more expensive the next year. And what worries me is, it's getting so expensive to go to college these days. what are these kids going to do? Because not everybody can afford that.
No, not at all. It is scary. I'm in the same boat. At one point I will have all three of my kids will be in college at the same time.
Yep. Same here.
That scares me as to what we're going to do.
Well, hopefully your college will be profitable at that point, and then they'll be getting paid to go to school and running a business, all while getting their degree. That'd be pretty nice.
Exactly. That's the plan. Like my plan is a couple years from now, people will look back and say, "Oh my God, why didn't we think of that?" But I'm not trying to keep it to ourselves. I think it's a model that schools could just employ. There are schools that have a lot more resources than us that can get started and be way out ahead.
Yeah.
But I think we got to rethink this business model. You can't rely, in no business can you rely on one revenue stream. And academia has done it for centuries.
Yeah. Man, that's we're done. Thanks for being on the podcast. We're done. We've got it all figured out right here. We're going to build these businesses and we're going to crush it and make college affordable for everybody. So I love that. And so for me, it's the, how do I dream? It's write it down on paper, right? It's me and my journal right here, and just being able to have some alone time and quiet time, and then just let these thoughts that come from when I'm exercising or on a walk or driving or wherever, right? We all these crazy ideas. And I go and I ask, Siri on my phone, who she'll probably turn on now. And I just say, remind me, next Wednesday at noon to journal about this idea, and then I just get this laundry list of ideas to journal about and think about. And it's where Visionary Wealth Advisors, our wealth management firm, came from. It's where Beyond, our members only experience over here, came from. And it's taking those things, writing them down, and then going public with them. And I think obviously you're going to agree, because you just did that, right? You could easily have just kept that goal and that dream inside and talked around it, right? But I think the biggest and best leaders go public. They have an abundance mentality of, here's my idea, take it, steal it. If you can do it, go for it. So when you think about that, abundance versus scarcity, what comes to mind for you?
I've always been in the abundance camp, right? I've always felt like my success comes through the agency of others, right? And so just naturally, like my whole thing is I've always loved being a mentor to folks. And I've always seen that, there's definitely a time, and I would say when I was consulting, consulting is it's a field where you are very selfish and you can make a good living for yourself, but you just don't impact that many people. And that's kind of what I've seen between my past life and what I do now. Like I could easily say, all right, well, I make enough money, kids will be getting to college. But the truth was, I just wasn't impacting that many lives. I was helping my clients grow. I was good, but just wasn't impacting that many lives. And I can see the difference now. Like I still remember a few weeks back, a young lady was in my office, and she said she had this idea that she's been just spooling around with, and we've been talking through it, and she's finally getting to a place, and we got her into an accelerator, and she won a little bit of money. And she was in my office, and she said to me, Professor Meade, I thank God for putting you in my life. She's like, I struggle so much. I didn't think I could do this, but you made me believe. And for me, I was like, this is what it's all about. This is how I now define success. It's helping other people achieve their dream. And if I can do that, right, like I keep the main thing, which is every Quinnite's an entrepreneur. Through that, I will achieve my dream. But it's been very enlightening, and someone says something like that to you, you never know what to say, right? You just kind of say thank you.
Very humbling.
Right. It blew me away, but it reminded me that I was on the right track.
Solid. So solid. I usually ask this question later at the end of the podcast, but I'll ask it now just based on where we're at. You can see this sticker here, F greater than P. And this is our firm's mission. It's my personal mission. It's my main thing, staying the main thing, is helping people achieve a future greater than their past. And, I think no matter who you are, it doesn't mean your past was bad, right? It just means, but everybody wants, I shouldn't say everybody. I think most people, especially people listening to this podcast, They want a future greater than their past. And so when you hear that, what comes to mind for you?
I would say it makes me think of the story I kind of opened up with in the beginning. I'd say it's really family when I think about future greater in your past, and it's amazing what can happen in a generation, right? I think of so my grandfather, who we used to go back to the Caribbean every summer, and when I tell people that, they're like, "Man, you had a great." That must have been amazing to go to the Caribbean every summer. I said, "Well, we weren't at a resort,
right? You weren't at the Four Seasons on the beach,
yeah." And my grandfather was a farmer, so this wasn't like a lap of luxury. But man, that dude worked so hard. And what I never knew until he passed away was I remember my mother saying that he couldn't read or write. That blew my mind. But then his daughter, my mother, she left Montserrat. That's the island my parents are from. Left Montserrat, came to the States, and then went to some trade school. Both my parents have about high school degrees. And then that's that generation. And then their son, has a graduate degree, runs a department at a school, teaches at a school. And so when I think about future better than past, I just think it's amazing what can happen in that generation. And so I started looking at my kids and just start to think about what could they become, right? Like it's just amazing what can happen in generations. And so I take that thinking to my students, right? And I start saying, now that I'm in your life, where can I help you get to? And for many of my students, a lot of my students are Pell Grant students. And in financial terms, that means their household incomes are anywhere between like 30 and 60,000 a year, right? And so at that amount, you're dealing with students who don't come from wealth. They're not having conversations about money in the house. And that's not a dig on them. It's just the reality of if your household makes that sort of money. And so when I look at a future being greater than your past, I think of the benefit of them coming into my orbit and me sharing my network with them. And so changing the trajectory of their lives is going to make their future so much more different than their past or what their future could have been.
Yeah.
So that's what comes to mind.
I like that. So I call this the bounce back theory. What I've learned for myself and through others of dealing with successful people for the last, 25 years is the bounce back theory. The most successful people bounce back from disappointment, from the no, right? Getting told no, something bad happened, whatever, right? The most successful ones bounce back quickly. How do you bounce back from setbacks?
Yeah, that question is so dead on because you have so many of them.
Right.
I would say, well, first when you're in it, you definitely wallow in it. I think about what I alluded to when we had the research company, and we had our first offer to buy it, and we had that offer during the whole .com boom. And so what threw us off was our ego. We were a research company, but we were reading about all these .com companies that were making, all this money from being bought out. And so we thought we should be valued like that. Obviously, hindsight being 2020, we weren't bringing in that kind of money. We didn't. There was no way we could get that kind of valuation. But we were 24 years old, and so we just kind of fumbled through it, and we didn't have anybody who had been through that. So we didn't have any advisors. So I can't think of a worse situation for like two 25-year-olds to be talking to people about buying their company with no advisors on our side, right? It just, at best, all we had was Google back then. It's a perfect storm to mess it up. And so really that change, that really changed the trajectory of our lives. And, I don't think it made it bad for either of us, but we should have had a larger agency, right? Like we should have been part of a holding company. That was our offers. And so then at one point, because of that, then we were like, all right, where do we go? And then this is far enough back that what really created the business after that, we didn't get the sales, was then 9/11, right? And so then no one's buying anything back then. And then I started thinking like, so where do we go from here, right? Like at that point we had nothing. And so we scrambled. We were like scrambling for a second act. And that truly was the reason that I applied to business school, because it was like, there's no business to be had, right? And prior to that, my prospects were like, well, what are we going to do? And so business school was like a safe haven. It was like you could still feel like you're progressing while you figure some stuff out. And that's almost what I needed. I needed like air cover to figure out what was next. And so I think for me to truly answer the question, what do you do in those situations? It's really just, I go back to thinking, all right, what do I want to achieve here? What is the goal? And then really thinking about how I can get to that goal. And it's never easy. It's never as easy as people make it sound, because in the moment you're struggling internally, but it really is just trying to stay focused on, and I go back, just, what's the main thing? What do I got to do to get to that point? But yeah, there's been so many bumps in the road. And one of my favorite words nowadays is pivot, right?
Yep.
Something's gonna happen. So how do you pivot? How do you pivot and still stay on offense? I'm constantly, I love sports. So one of my analogies is always, you got to get off defense, stop being on defense. How do you get on offense?
Yeah, that's strong. How do you find the main thing, right? So somebody's driving down the road right now and they're saying, man, these two guys keep talking about the main thing.
Right.
How do you go find that I must, change the way we do the university and have more than one revenue source? Like, what would that process, what advice would you have for that person?
Yeah. It took me a while. I would always go back to truly what makes you happy, and really trying to find that piece of it. And so, for me, what ended up happening was, to get me on this journey was actually, I was on a hike with one of my best friends, and, one of my brothers that I mentioned before. And we were talking, and when we talk, we keep pushing each other. He's like, how's the business? And I'm like, I would probably hit this in sales. I'll probably try to increase it by this. And, family's good. And he was like, all right, all that stuff's good, but what are you going to do next? And, I kept defaulting back, and he's like, all right, well, what makes you happy? And I don't know why that question was so hard to answer. Like, I was like, huh. And so what I didn't say was, we were on a hike in Japan. And so I mentioned that because I was there for a couple more days, and I'm flying back, 14-hour flight back. And I'm just journaling, and I'm like, how could this be so hard to answer? What makes you happy? And I couldn't put it down. I just couldn't answer the question. I couldn't answer the question in a way that was honest, right? There was so many things I could say. I could say, oh, yeah, we're going to increase sales, but I couldn't say what would make me happy. And then, I kind of went through some of the motions that I usually do. I run. So when I'm running, I think a lot, like, truly, what makes me happy? Like, money aside, what could I do and just be happy about it? And so what I got to was, I said, man, when we used to live in LA, when I had the agency out there, the one that grew to 20 mil, I was an adjunct professor at UCLA, and I had the time of my life in the classroom. It was so fun. And I remember the only reason I stopped was because we had our third. And so at that point, I then had 3 kids under 3, and I just couldn't do anymore. And so that was why I stopped. And, I remember as an adjunct, you make no money. But as I was just kind of journaling, I was like, if I had to be honest with myself, nothing made me happier than being in the classroom with those students. And so that set me on a journey, like, how do I figure it out? And so from that, once I had written that down, then that had morphed into what I said earlier about, oh, well, maybe this is a way, maybe I could create some curriculum to find more minority owners for agencies. Like I was trying to morph it into something. And that's where that went. But like I said, as I pulled on that thread some more, it just was maybe divine intervention that I connected with a president of a school who said, "Hey man, we'd love to get this started," which then put me in a classroom again. But it really was about just journaling and really just trying to answer for me what makes me happy and pushing the money aside, which, isn't realistic all the time. But to answer that question, that's where I was. So if someone's listening to this, I would say, try to answer that for yourself. Like really, what could you spend your time doing that would just make you happy? And it's different for everybody. Like for me, my energy comes from being in the classroom, from seeing students like get it. They're like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't think of it like that. So
yeah,
that's what it is for me. So truly finding out what makes you happy.
Well, I think we just gave our listeners a homework assignment, right? Is just go with yourself, ask yourself the question, what makes you happy? And I think that's awesome, man. What books would you recommend? Are you a reader?
Yes, definitely a reader. What's great now is I'm reading this book, Unequal Childhood. It's not a business book, but I think it's a really, really great book just to show really what happens when people have different resources available to them. And I think it's phenomenal because in many ways, what I see is the difference between the way I was raised and the way my kids are raised. And it's not like one is better than the other, but you see how different the kids are as a result of the different resources they have access to, and how it improves their maturity or affects their maturity, their independence. Not right or wrong, but it's just fascinating to see that.
You said it was Unequal Childhood?
Yeah, Unequal Childhood.
Okay, awesome. And any advice you have for staying a student of the game?
I'd say my thing is I always say this: you want to be the best you can be in your field, and so I always challenge people, and I used to do this with clients too, right? Like if someone was going to introduce you for a keynote, how would they describe you, right? Like what would they say before they walked you up on stage, right? So that's the easy part. But the challenge is really a year later, what would they say differently, right? Like what have you done in a year that people would say, oh my God, this person's done this. And just in the last year, they did this. And then keep challenging yourself, right? You show back up for that conference a year later, what changes? And the reason I do that is because you should always be doing something that makes you more valuable in the marketplace.
Yep. Solid, man. Well, Jeff Meade, thank you so much for being on the Circuit of Success. And it's amazing the impact that you're making, man. So keep rocking. I can't wait to watch from afar. And I'm going to see that Paul Quinn College just be so profitable. It's going to be amazing to watch, man. So where do our listeners find more of you?
Yeah, they can. The easy part is they could go to my website. It is jeff-meade.com, and Meade is spelled MEADE. So jeff-meade.com, and that can take you anywhere. And if you go to LinkedIn, you can find me again, Jeff Meade as well. And check us out on Paul Quinn's website, paulquinn.edu.
Awesome. All right, my man. Well, stay with me here, but thank you so much for being on the Circuit of Success.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.